universities research is early, very, very early. And I mean, that's a very normal thing for people to think, right? But then when we get into it, so the universities will go, hey, Keong, OTB, please have a look at this project. We think there's commercial opportunity. There is commercial opportunity here. And in most cases, the universities, as you know, Chris, a lot of them have their own funds now. So they're investing too. They would like to invest in these researchers too, and that research group. Through that lens, it's not as early as what people think. And I think that is another very, very interesting point. Yes, the TRL might be low, but our belief is that TRL, the big inflection points in a lot of these projects, as you would know, Chris, is going from TRL 3 to maybe 4 to 5, which most people might not be aware of what TRL is, but maybe most listeners do. But you're talking about something that has worked in the lab, and you just want to see if it can be replicated out of the lab in a very small scale. Could be a prototype. But that, if it can be done, is a really big deal because that sets the foundation for commercialization.
Welcome to the Lab to Market Leadership Podcast. Too many advanced science and engineering companies fail to deliver their innovations from the lab to the market. We are on a mission to change that. My name is Chris Reichhelm, and I'm the founder and CEO of Deep Tech Leaders. Each week, we speak with some of the world's leading entrepreneurs, investors, corporates, and policymakers about what it takes to succeed on the lab to market journey. Join us. Does the deep tech industry need another early stage investor? I mean, there are a lot out there. And thinking about it, I guess my answer would be, it depends. If it's another early stage investor that is going to move slowly and generally clog up the spinning out process, then no, I don't think we need another one of those. And I think most of you would agree. But if it's an early stage investor that's going to bring pace and network and advice that will genuinely help set a company on the right trajectory, then it's an emphatic yes. I have worked with a lot of very early stage investors in my time throughout the UK, throughout Europe, throughout North America. And nearly all of them are very intelligent, capable, very well-meaning. But I will say that none of them, I don't think I can think of a single one that has the level of energy, enthusiasm, and dare I say pace that this week's guest has. I am delighted to be joined by Keong Chan, who is the managing director of an investment group called Out the Back Ventures. And unless you've been living under a rock for the last year, then you've probably met Keong if you're an active participant in this world, either as another investor, most probably, or if you're a host to spinouts and startups within the deep tech world. Keong and his colleague John Rock are building this investment group to help spin out and incorporate and set on the right trajectory outstanding innovation with the potential to become a world-leading business. And I've had the pleasure of getting to know these guys over the last year, particularly Keong. We've had a lot of conversations, and today we're going to have a discussion on where we see this opportunity going. So a lot of questions I'm going to have for Keong that actually and genuinely I haven't asked before. So this is going to be great. You're going to get a chance to meet him too if you don't already know him. So let's get into it. Keong Chan, thank you so much for joining me. I know, well, I don't think I've ever asked you this before, but how did you kind of start on this venture yourself? where did you get involved? Where did you see the opportunity? And I guess kind of where did you come from that led you to say, I want to actually get involved in what's going on here?
Yeah, thanks, Chris. No, we haven't actually spoken about this, and I often joke with John Rock, my co-founder, who you've met, that when I meet people at parties or in gatherings, and people ask me what I do, I just kind of hope that they stop and I start asking what they do, and then it stops, because it is a really interesting thing that's happening here, and I hope that really genuinely I hope that what we're doing is creating a different pathway for spin-outs and startups in the ecosystem. So my experience actually from a work perspective, so obviously live in Australia, my work perspective has always been from investment. So I've been involved in public markets, so listed company environments for almost 20 years now, probably over 20 years, come to think of it. It's a long time, actually. It's gone fast, but quick, slow. But yeah, it just gave me an understanding of what investors, I think, are looking for. So, as in most careers, just trying to work it out, Chris, thoroughly unemployable. I started off in Big Four accounting firms, and I'm surprised it lasted that long, because, I just want to do what I want to do. My wife, who's been so supportive of me, and I couldn't do this without her, and support of the family. But I just was thinking very deeply about, so because of all the people I met during the public markets, and you meet so many people, and what's interesting is that you meet people, and like what we've established, you and I, over the last 1 to 2 years, you just meet people and you just get along. And when you meet people early on in your career, you don't know why you're friends. You might do something, but it's not a transactional relationship. But as a consequence of that, we all growing up as peers. So now my friends, a lot of them are family offices, high net wealth. They are doing all these things, and it turns out that they are, people that who I'm working with, and it's created a situation where I was on a lot of boards, company boards, Chris, as chairman in a couple of instances, and we're really being the proxy or the lead point on the investments for the syndicate into these public companies. But then COVID happened. And that's like for all of us, it really made all of us assess very deeply about what we wanted to do. And quite honestly, it probably took me the better part of 12 months of a lot of contemplation and a lot of thinking about what are the opportunities. And somehow, somewhere, I don't exactly remember with precision what happened, but it came to me that actually a lot of the deals that we've seen have come from universities at some point or touched somewhere. What is that? And as a consequence of that, John and I had a conversation over a few months, and we said, "Yep, we're going to cease our careers our careers at that point in time, and really roll the dice on this entirely new, undiscovered adventure." But it's hard to do that thing part time, Chris. It's like my wife says to me, "Keong, you guys are helping startups, but you are actually a startup." And I never really thought of it like that, but we operate on startup pace, which is, to your point, why maybe we're doing all these strange things, which I'm sure we'll speak
you
about
guys
later.
Definitely have that energy. I've met, I think most investors have, very few investors that I know have that real entrepreneurial type energy. There are very few investors. They do exist. They're definitely out there. And I think generally speaking, they're thought of by the wider community as some of the best investors. Because just in energy terms, they seem to match the pace of the best companies or the best entrepreneurs. And I think that, we spoke about this on a recent episode with another investor, how the importance of pace, and you still need a level head. You still need level heads in all of this. But that if you have an investor who is matching your pace, they, in terms of energy, are more likely to get what's at stake for you. And perhaps you're more likely to forge a very strong relationship. I think by and large, in my experience, too few investors have that pace. And most sit there almost a little comfortably, thinking that, well, all the deals are going to come to us and we will choose which deals we want to do. I'm sure this isn't true. But, I think from the perspective of many people that are looking for funding, they see the investors as the ones with power. They're the ones that can call the shots. Of course, it's not true because investors have to please their LPs as well. And so they're constantly on the lookout for capital. So it's a long line of anxiety and waiting, a big chain of it. But you guys obviously have this kind of energy that I think is so needed in this space, and it's great to see. And I'm sure because of it, you're coming up with a lot of great opportunities.
Well, I think without going too far into that, I mean, we've obviously created and developed a lot of great relationships with venture capitalists and VCs and investors around the world. And, it's important to recognize, they definitely have their place, and look how much value is being created, through that ecosystem. It's undeniable. And it's really important going forward. But I think you've raised some interesting points, and also a similar observation around the structural. If you kind of dig a bit deeper into how they're structured and how they're compensated and incentivized, it does probably lead to some of that behavior. And none of it is malicious. It's well intentioned, but when you've got that feeling that you have time, probably just engaging with universities and the researchers a little bit differently. The way we're structured is that we, as Chris, you know this, we haven't formed a fund, and we get asked to form a fund quite often, and you never say never. Of course, maybe one day that makes sense, but we syndicate our deals, and we are very fortunate to have a growing group of investors who are investing in our deal flow on the basis of, like, if we don't like it, we'll tell you, but if we don't say anything, then we're in. Which is also a really great way to get these things moving and to have the flexibility to be responsive. And by nature of that, if you think about from that perspective how we operate, until we get things done or we find something that's interesting, there's nothing really to invest in. So, we're motivated, and we've done that deliberately because our upside is obviously through our model, which I'm sure we can talk about further, is the co-founding of these startups. We are interested in the equity upside, and we're also interested and aligned with the researcher and the university equity upside. So there's no I don't know, like kind of safe haven. We're constantly thinking about what are we going to do, how does it work, and what's the next thing, which I think is so important in these things, because you're right. Otherwise, things just tend to take
just to be clear to everyone, this is at the very earliest stage. This is when things are probably still manifested in a form of research. But in many cases, they haven't actually been incorporated yet. So you're helping to incorporate the research into a company and to then help point it in the right direction. Give it that early capital. We'll talk about some of the other services in terms of talent and network and advice, and then setting it on the right trajectory. So there is no other fund that's going to come along, or there's no other investment that's going to happen before you guys. You're operating at the earliest stage. Yeah.
Yes, that's true. Yeah.
And
absolutely.
Where have you? So you guys are based in Perth, which is in Australia. I'm sure everyone knows that. But me being American, let me just kind of highlight it as a novelty. Where, but you're definitely not confined to the Australian market. You guys are going everywhere. So what's up with that? Why go everywhere?
Oh, geez. That's a great question. I haven't had the chance to speak about this with anyone apart from my wife, maybe when she asked me the same question. We're based in Perth. It's Western Australia. I believe it's the most isolated city in the world. The nearest city is 2,100 kilometers away. I saw that on YouTube somewhere. But Perth is a really dynamic, Chris. It's a beautiful place, so that's helpful. But because of its location and its proximity, mining and resources is a big deal. actually the mining industry is all predicated on risk. It's all about finding something. So whether that permutates culturally to us, I'm not really sure. But that may be a reason, and it's you're right, very unique. Obviously, the family considerations is an aspect of that. But going back to the other part of your question around what motivates us to go and see everything and meet as many people as we can, which has taken us to some incredible places, But I think that the endless curiosity of what is going on and what people are thinking, and to spend enormous amounts of time with universities and the researchers is an honor. It's a pleasure. It's something where even people when they think about these things, oh, it's early. Well, is it really early? Is that because someone looked at the PowerPoint, or they looked? How did they come to that assessment? That a lot of the things, and one of the things when I was thinking about in leading up to the podcast, Chris, is I think because of the benefit of not knowing too much and having a really open mind, and not to say it's anything unique, but genuinely coming in with a why, or why, how come it's like that, has been so helpful, because it's been because of that naivety, I suppose, it's allowed us to have some really interesting conversations, which addresses those principles that have kind of, for whatever reason, set in stone. So, example, and you mentioned before, universities research is early, very, very early. And that's a very normal thing for people to think, right? But then when we get into it, so the universities will go, hey, Keong, OTB, please have a look at this project. We think there's commercial opportunity. There is a commercial opportunity here. And in most cases, the universities, as you know, Chris, a lot of them have their own funds now. So they're investing too. They would like to invest in these researchers too, and that research group. Through that lens, it's not as early as what people think. And I think that is another very, very interesting point. Yes, the TRL might be low, but our belief is that TRL, the big inflection points in a lot of these projects, as you would know, Chris, is going from TRL 3 to maybe 4 to 5, which most people might not be aware of what TRL is, but maybe most listeners do. But you're talking about something that has worked in the lab, and you just want to see if it can be replicated out of the lab in a very small scale. It could be a prototype, but that, if it can be done, is a really big deal, because that sets the foundation for commercialization. And we're not talking techno-economics here. We're not saying that is potentially better than this. We're saying, no, that stands alone and everything can form around that. And that's a very different value proposition. And when you talk to investors, especially early stage investors and family offices and high net wealths, to be honest, I don't think a lot of them need more money, but I think they do like being involved in the edge of things and what is happening. And that is the dinner talk. That is the conversations they have with their friends and other partners of people in their network. So again, I think, Chris, one of the things that I would love to say, and I would encourage others, who have the opportunity to be in this amazing ecosystem, is just to really think deeply about the assumptions, the terms that are used. What is a founder? Who is that? Why does it have to be an academic that needs to leave to be considered the founder of a startup? Is that really the case? Where did that come from? Things like this. That's been so helpful when we've been talking to the universities and researchers.
I love that that perspective and the insight around the importance of that naive mindset, which doesn't encumber you and keeps you open and willing to ask the obvious questions, which I think at that very early stage is still so important. I think I think that experience that you've developed, obviously on the public company side, but willing to bring some of that understanding of the way companies need to work ultimately to the trajectory that can be the launch point for a new company, I think is very helpful. I think is very helpful too. I wonder how other investors that are doing the same kinds of activities as you guys. I wonder how they see you because of some of this. Do you think you are a partner? Are you a competitor? What's your sense so far?
Well, look, I think we are a partner. I genuinely mean that. Sure, maybe some might consider us competitive, but the reality is that if you consider how many universities there are in the world and the research projects and researchers, there's so many opportunities for others that are similar to, we've been called venture builders. I think that's an appropriate term. We're also co-investors, so we have a hybrid model of the approach that we've developed really, Chris. And the other thing I want to mention is, the tech transfer offices, they get a pretty hard time. And we're very sympathetic with what they do. We are so, we really admire what they do because it's really challenging within the university environment to find the IP, to protect the IP, develop the relationships for a startup and for investors to come in. I mean, and all the legal things that need to be sorted out along the way. So that has been an amazing, relationship for us. And if you think about, what we can do within the ecosystem, our relationships with commercialization / technology transfer offices around the world in all these universities that we're dealing with and national labs and, some of the places that we're working in. If we can help those people get more things out, and we can bring that to the market and get other investors to invest with us at an early stage. But we've curated a lot of that. We spent a lot of time developing those channels and pathways. I can't help but think if we look at it from an investment point of view, I think it'd be just more deal flow coming out earlier from the universities that are potentially more interesting and investable. Because one of the other issues, as we know, is that when it's no one's fault again, and it's just the nature of things. Maybe first-time founders, academics who would like to be founders, it's really challenging. And also we're sympathetic to that. So maybe our involvement, where we are involved, can help shape it up so that it can become investable. So I think it's been great, and the response that we've had from other VCs and other people in the ecosystem is nothing but encouraging. So I think we're just doing it a different way, Chris, rather than leaving it to chance, so to speak.
I get
someone
that. The global outlook you're taking, and just to be clear to everyone, I mean, you guys are almost forensically going through the leading university labs globally and the leading national laboratories globally as well. I don't know any other early stage investment group that is taking the approach you are, where you are being so meticulous at making sure and so you're going to the not so obvious spots, but the not so obvious spots that produce outstanding research, but also some of the really obvious spots that, from the sound of it, not many people have been to yet, or they haven't done much with yet. And I'm talking about, for example, the big national labs in the US. Talk a little bit about that, and talk a little bit about maybe some of the feedback you've had from there, the experience, and what taking this approach, this big global approach, gives you think, that that if you were to localize it, it wouldn't give you as much.
Well, I mean, that's, luckily, John and I, from the inception of, we're nearly 5 years in now. It's incredible, that we've been doing this for that long period of time, because it doesn't feel that long, which is the nature of a startup, I suppose. But we've always had a global outlook, Chris. We knew from a very early stage that, we could work with some great universities in Perth. We could expand a bit more into Australia on the eastern seaboard, Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, which is some amazing universities, and our largest universities on the eastern seaboard of Australia. But we also knew that the world, especially in deep tech, it's all connected, isn't it? And we know that the markets are likely to be outside of Australia. So in terms of growth, in terms of what else is happening thematically in research in deep tech around the world, we knew very early on that it wasn't enough. It wasn't sufficient to be only looking at Australian research projects in Australian universities. And very comforting was that the universities at very high levels of the university that we deal with were totally responsive to that and acknowledged that as being a really key point of differentiation for us. But coming back to your question around where we are, maybe that'll be helpful. So yes, we are obviously quite active here in Australia. In the UK, as you know, Chris, we've had a lot of discussions about this previously. We are, working at University of Oxford. We deal with many of the universities, through Set Squared, through Midlands Mindforge there with Lisa. She's been amazing, introducing us to the commercialization offices of various universities. And yeah, we'll make a trip to Cambridge later. We've talked to UCL, and some of them have been guests, part of the ecosystem Summit Day on this podcast, and also into Northern Gristone with Manchester, and the list goes on. So you're right. We're quite active there. In the Netherlands, we have 3 universities that we deal with, the technical universities, and a very interesting setup there in terms of culture and the way that the government supports research. And yes, you're right. I mean, in terms of the depth and the opportunity scale of what we are looking at, and which is the reason why we're also bringing 2 people on in the US to help us deal with the pipeline, is the national labs and also the universities. They're also amazing. The national labs, Chris, I think, yes, you're right. They are obvious, but, you're dealing with the Department of Energy and US Patel, which is UT Patel, sorry, which is the organization that runs those labs. You're talking about, for us collectively, I must give credit to John as well, because he's been obviously a huge part of what this is all about. A huge amount of investment of time and financial resources into developing those relationships. And at the national labs, it's quite intimidating actually. If you look at the directives, which is basically the rule book of how you engage with contract research or you can license technologies, I think it's a compendium. I don't know. It's probably many volumes. I haven't looked at it, and it's really intimidating, And I can understand people go, "What is this? How do we deal with this?" But as with most things, when you spend the time with people in the most genuine way, with no ulterior motive, but to just be there to help. The national labs and the people who are in those have normally been there for a very long time. They are true to the cause of science. And the researchers there are totally altruistic in the sense that they're not there for the promotion in terms of the academic career, which is at universities, a well-trodden path to go to get a tenured professorship. I mean, that's an amazing achievement. But at the labs, there's not that. It is about this. And this is what they're putting their life's work to. And they're very, as you can imagine, the best of the best, right? In that particular field. So when you see that, how do you deal with that? And how do you spin it? How do you know where they are? How does this work? And it's that part that we've been able to develop to a point now where I think we've been such a privilege to have incredible access to labs. We work very closely with Oak Ridge National Lab. We are visiting Argonne and Los Alamos and Idaho National Lab later this year. They are a very small community of people, Chris, of people who are speaking to each other, saying, "Can we work with these people? Are they good people? Is this someone who, because they've only got so much time." And I think about ammunition. They cannot go to researchers saying, "Oh yes, this is another potential investor," and that potential investor disappoints or misrepresents or doesn't do what they say they can do. Not to say they will invest, but are they prepared to spend the time with them to really understand it, or is it flippant? So they're very, very aware. And to think again to my earlier point, universities / national labs and research institutions. They're uncommercial, but actually I would argue they're extremely discerning and they're thinking about this very carefully. And they will only let people into the inner circle when they feel like they've spent the time to understand them. So when it comes to the vernacular, the terminologies used in national lab setting versus the universities are different in the US, Netherlands, UK, Australia. Similar terms, but different ways that they think about things. And then when you start speaking to something they understand and they recognize, then you can get things moving, because that in itself takes a bit of time to understand, the wrinkles and the slight variations in the ways that the different places operate. And when you pull them all together, Chris, and we've spoken about Saudi Arabia as well as another, and the Middle East is another really interesting point, which is another place we'll go to later this year. But when you pull them together, you see threads, and you see thematics of where people are focusing their time, and what the sovereign capability, a lot of the sovereign capability, what governments are thinking about in terms of their research capability within their countries, and what they actually want what they want these research institutions to spend time on. It is actually obvious over time, but from the outside, there's a lot going on. That's an amazing. So hopefully that helps be able to articulate some of that.
I mean, that was a great explanation. And what occurs to me is that, so this is all about building trust. And I think to be successful in business generally, this is the truism of truisms. You've got to take the time. You've got to invest the time to build trust. Some of these organizations, like these national labs, like researchers, particularly when this is their life's work, very few things are going to be more important for them than this. So they're going to be, as you say, very discerning about who they choose to let in to their world to help them. And it's less about them not necessarily wanting to or not wanting to let go. It's more about, this really matters to us. So we really need to trust you. And I think, just doing it is the simple things though, right? It is taking the time to be with them and to listen and to ask questions. It's not some it's not some complex web of dark secrets and activity. It's being a human being and doing what human beings, intelligent human beings excel at, which is listening, being present, asking questions, taking the time. Time is a big one. I think just taking the time, coming back and not, recognizing it's not going to happen in a meeting or 2 meetings. It's going to happen over a period of time. But I think it sounds like, and it feels like from the discussions we've had, that you guys seem to excel at that.
Yes, you're right, Chris, and I've been thinking about this. It's an interesting observation. For example, most of my communications now happen on my phone, so getting away from the emails are important to summarize, but they're not a great way to create relationships. And you're a leading world expert, Chris. What am I here telling someone like you and what you do, what's the right way to do things. But I think getting those relationships to the phone, because then you can be responsive. And that's how I speak to my friends. I'm not emailing them. So why would I think that to develop a relationship, it has to be done or should be done over email? So things like that. And we watch that, John and I and our team, there's quite a few of us now that we're, that are joining us, which is amazing. We never thought that would happen so quickly. But, getting the right people culturally that are working with us, and we're equally as guarded with the relationships, and we make it really clear for people joining. Hey guys, this is our friends, we are so guarded about this too, because we don't want to disappoint them, and we don't want them. We can't do everything, but we want them to understand that when you deal with OTB, you're going to get a really great person who is emotionally intelligent and a good listener and trying to help and do their thing, right? So I think that's been so helpful, Chris, and I think that's been a huge shift, for us in terms of being able to kind of create a different way to communicate. Because you're right. In any given day, I communicate with maybe 3 or 4 continents. I don't think about it like that because it's normal now, but that is what's happening, 4 to 5 different places around the world. And that's fine, because it can happen in a really organic way. And I think that's been really
when
helpful.
you look at sources of activity, what's exciting you right now? Where are you seeing stuff that you think is just like, holy cow, that's what they're doing? And look, let's take as kind of table stakes, everything in deep tech is kind of amazing. All right. Really, like if you love amazing stuff, amazing science and engineering, innovation, pushing the boundaries, deep tech is like heaven. But where, because you've got this global perspective, you're seeing all this stuff come up. Where, for you, when you're looking at stuff, you're like, that's like another level.
Well, yeah, I mean, you come across similar research fields when you talk to universities and the labs. Where we see, for us, where we're particularly interested, which is our interest in the national labs, amongst Oak Ridge, Idaho, Los Alamos, those three in particular. Nuclear technology, and I know you've had, I'm a big fan of the podcast, Chris. I think I'll be the first one or two that jump on.
Thank you. You're the one. Thank you.
I'm a supporter.
Thank you.
Sure.
Exactly.
Who else is there?
Me.
But it's nuclear technology. When you speak to the researchers and when you read the headlines, whether it's fusion or fission. You hear Gen 4 SMR microreactors. There's so much underneath the hood that needs to be worked on. So what we understand is that, and it's so amazing that companies in the spotlight can raise the amount of capital they can raise, and they can articulate the vision and the growth. That is a skill, but as a consequence of that, they're focused, very, very focused on a particular area. And what you see when you speak to the researchers, because the researchers go into those startups and they're all friends, right? So there's very small pockets of people who are good at these, different things, a very small community. And they will say, look, Keong, that thing there that's super important for that particular nuclear technology, whichever aspect you're talking about, fuel reactor types, or the blankets on fusion reactors. A lot of those things are really low TRL. Really low, surprisingly low. And from the outside, you go, are you serious? Like I thought we're 5 years away or 10 years away from fusion. And then you say, well, yeah, that is possible, but there's a lot of stuff that needs to be sorted out. So for us, what an opportunity to be able to go in there, develop those things while the big guys are getting it all sorted out, which is very important. We can be there as a very convenient point. Either they acquire the technologies or they license or something. But the point is that we can develop those in parallel while they're working on the big thing. We can work on a few things that will be really helpful at some point in time in the future, which is all about investing for the future. Yeah. So nuclear technologies, Chris, is an amazing thing. And I don't need to tell you that. I think you're very well aware of that, and your listeners will be too. But I think the comment and the takeaway I would have from that, from speaking to so many people, surprisingly, so much innovation to come, surprisingly. And it's so exciting. Because most people will go, well, I don't know, we're good here. I mean, I don't know where else there is to go here. I think it's all been covered. Not really. It's it's a lot to do.
I don't think anyone would say there's no more to do within energy. We still have a ton to do in energy. And I think, my view, but I think nuclear is such a critical part of the mix going forward. It is.
It's undoubted now, isn't it? It's an important part of the base load. The other area, Chris, I'd love to just, again, big picture stuff, because I'm not a technical person. I just kind of like learn through osmosis and the privilege of listening to so many people. Geez, the chip, the motherboard, the chipset here is going to change in the future. So at the moment, GPU, silicon, CMOS, that is it. I mean, and as anyone who would know in our area, in our world, and people who might not know, geez, it's as an engineering feat for humanity. Like, wow. It's inconceivable that it would be like this, actually. It's a remarkable achievement for humankind. But where it's going, and what we understand, is that you hear about quantum chips. There's an emerging field of neuromorphic, which is a really fancy way of saying, well, the materials can do a lot of that processing. You don't need to shove it all into the cloud and get the GPUs to be able to workhorse. And then there's optics and photonics, which is the other area of interest. But basically, what we understand is that the GPU, CMOS, and silicon at the moment as we know, it's just using too much energy. It's like a very forced way through this amazing engineering feat, with the transistors. But that is so challenging, isn't it? And I think there's awareness now. Geez, where does that energy use, the use of water, what is going on here? That's forcing the research and the development of quantum, because quantum in itself is just, depending on the application, it's very specific. But in some areas of quantum, drug discovery, material discovery, it's going to be amazing. And it does it, the point is that it does it at such low energy consumption, because that's just in its nature. Neuromorphic is also using materials. For example, Chris, one of the areas that we understand is that, and one of the ones, the startups out of the Netherlands that we're supporting, they're doing something with a car manufacturer, a big one, so that, too many of those. But what they're really interested in is using a neuromorphic chip to process speech so that 70% of the work can be done by the chip, so that only 30% of it needs to be done in the cloud. So that talking to the car will be so much more human-like, because you're not waiting for it to come up and down. You get the response just like you would as a person. That's pushing the edge of silicon and CMOS in the car, which is energy use, which is batteries, which is all of that, right? So that's neuromorphic. And I've talked to a few people around the world on this. It's kind of barren. There's a few patches, but I can see neuromorphic as being on both the hardware and software as something emerging. And we're really focused on neuromorphic because I think quantum's got, had a bit of a head start, and there's a lot of activity there. And then you've got photonics and optics, which is something NVIDIA's looking at, which is basically using light to transfer data in a super efficient way, really low power again. So you can see in the future, Chris, on a chip, depending on the application. At the moment, we see silicon CMOS everywhere in our laptops and our devices. But in the future, I think you're going to have different types of silicon CMOS, neuromorphic for this application, quantum chip for this application with silicon. It's going to emerge, which is such an exciting thing, because you're really decreasing that load, from the grid, from the processing power. That's another big area that we're seeing.
Look, I think that's very exciting, and that kind of resonates with us too. If I look at the work that's coming in, or the work that we're getting contacted about more and more, so much of it, I would say half of it these days, is advanced compute, particularly with regards to innovations in the processor. The way we're processing any transaction right now, largely because of AI, but not only because of AI, but it has to change because we're hitting barriers. So we are going to see seeing different materials. We are hearing about different types of chips and a complete rethinking of the way chips are designed. So you have companies, and I'll shout out Ver Computing at the moment, who are rethinking the whole nature of the processor. You've got groups like Intel and IBM who are going big on neuromorphic computing and coming up with different chips. And you're going to have NVIDIA there too. And it's only natural that we have to rethink it given the current energy demands. This is unsustainable. It's just, this isn't, or we've got to rethink the way we're doing AI, and we've got to rethink LLMs. And, there's so much, that hangs on this. So when I find from my 30 years in the industry, when you get to these critical junctures within an industry, that forces a lot of innovation very quickly. Energy, I think we're getting to an interesting point. It's now mixing with politics. It's making it more complicated, particularly in the US, in my country. So it's but I think nevertheless, the economics of energy are still the economics of energy. And given the geoeconomic turmoil in the world right now, I think the economics are probably going to outweigh I think they're going to have more of a say as opposed to the politics of it. I think the geoeconomics hopefully will win, because a lot of this, and that's going to make things better with nuclear and solar and wind and so on. Some of these more renewable sources that we need to cement into the mix. Anyway, that's a whole other conversation for another time. So where does, what does the kind of, the next 1 or 2 years look like for you guys in terms of priorities? What are you trying to put in place to kind of, further establish yourselves?
Well, I'm spending a lot of time in terms of our pipeline development for projects, which is an obvious thing. And I would also say, Chris, I really wanted to add this bit on the end, when you asked me about which research areas. But I mean, I take a lot of inspiration from the SpaceXs of the world. I know people just kind of when I speak about these things, they go, "What are you talking about?" But we're really here, to make humans more productive. We're talking about interplanetary travel. We're talking about the moon as a substation, and there's a bit of like you mentioned, geopolitical tension, and that is a competitive situation. Who would have known that SpaceX would be like this, 10 years ago? I mean, someone did, obviously, some people did, but I think I want to just make it really clear that, yes, you get lost. You can get easily lost in terms of the niches and in the weeds of research. But what we're talking about is being able to create more energy, more things so that humanity can do more and not be restrained to the confines of Earth and what we're doing. So for us, we find that incredibly inspirational. I do myself, but so I always keep that in mind. It's something that I think about because it is a lot going on. But I would say, coming back to your point there about the next 1-2 years, Chris, we are growing our team, and I think we obviously, you and I have had many discussions about doing things together, and we will. But I think the growth of the team and getting more people to be part of OTB is so important. And the way that we're motivated and the people that are coming on is a really important point. So for us, we could envisage having people on the ground in the UK, the Netherlands, certainly in the US, in Australia, growing our team existing here, and also in Saudi Arabia. We've had quite a few conversations, and we'll be closely looking to add people to the mix over the next 6 to 12 months, progressively as we grow the team. And I think, for example, one of the research institutes we left off the list was NASA. So that is a conversation that we're going to be having at some point in time. We've already spoken to them earlier in the year. But these type of things, we just want to develop more and more of the relationships so we can do more, and hopefully be able to also because we are in so many places, being able to deliver really good outcomes for the universities and research, as well as our investors. It's something that we need to balance. So our business is a combination of capital, project management, and also talent. And I do in that flip side, Chris, because you ask such informed questions. I do want to speak about talent, and I think that talent is almost entirely underestimated in a lot of ways. And everyone, I think, is a throw around. Yes, talent's important, but I think it's probably the most determinative aspect of a startup, right? And in your experience as well, I think
it is totally. And I think I think everyone knows it's really important, but I think when people take the time to slow down and consider what makes the difference, it's always people that make the difference. It always is. If they take the time to figure out what went wrong, it's always people, almost always people, and the decisions that people make, and the behaviors that people exhibit, and the cultures that people create. And so I don't think it's underestimated. I think most people understand just how important it really is. But the fact of the matter is, people are so damn complicated. We are not like everything else around. And I know this, I have, most of my friends are investors of one type or another, or they work in finance. And I think, in fact, they do so because, they can deal with fixed assets or assets that are more easier to quantify. Humans are not easy to quantify at all. Humans are very difficult to quantify. You cannot, just because someone was good before doesn't mean they're going to be good again. And just because someone was, perhaps didn't put in an ideal performance before doesn't mean they're going to be subpar again. And so being able to predict performance, which is generally your job. If you're making an investment in a company and you're recruiting a new leader or a chair or a CTO or CFO, whatever, whoever you're for that young company, your responsibility is to predict performance. It is really, really difficult to do. And so I think that people know how difficult it is, but they almost throw their hands up sometimes because it is so difficult, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, Chris, I think, I don't think I know, of the interactions that you and I have and the many conversations we've had over the last year, 18 months. You've really given me a different perspective on what talent means. And I really didn't understand why it was a technology first. Okay, this is the technology. Let's go find someone now that would be appropriate for that technology. When we know that the people and the technology are equally, as important as each other. So our view is that we would like to develop the talent in parallel with our discovery of the technology. So because, in the end, the biggest issue, as you know, Chris, in your world, is good people are busy and they've got lots of things, lots of options. They can do whatever they want to do with their time, which is appropriate because they're really good. So how do you get them to care about something, and how do you try to sell them a technology? Do you try to sell them an incentive package? Is that the way to do it? Or, in our view, is probably the better approach is to get them in early to be part of the team so that they can understand what it is like to be part of it. Because then they're not being sold something or, as a proposition. They are there as legitimately part of the team and helping us shape it up. And I think that whether we call them a CEO, we call them an advisor, we call them someone who's interested to help, that can help. Because in the end, I think in the startup, especially these early stages, it's about someone who's willing to take the time to connect other people that can help the startup. And that is something that you've, whether you expressly kind of put in my mind, but every time I talk to you, I come away with that realization, no, actually we do need to start thinking about talent differently. And I think that's one. I hope come back to your question, Chris, maybe in the next 1 to 2 years, you and I can work on that together to provide something a little bit different.
No, thank you, Keong. I take the view that you can't convince anyone to join a startup, ever. You can convince someone to join your startup versus another startup. You can, but ultimately, these are really smart people. Half of them are emotionally mature, the other half aren't. But they're smart enough and they've got their stuff sorted enough to be able to make those decisions, in my view. You can't convince someone to join a startup if they're not inclined to join a startup, ever. So don't even bother with that. I think the thing that I've learned, and I guess where I've gotten to in 2025, is that to have the best chance of that, you need to have a pipeline. And the pipeline you need to have is of individuals that are generally up for impacting the trajectory of a company like this at the earliest stage. And so they're motivated to do that. And just as importantly, they're capable of doing that. And so you have to build that network over time. It is funny. Well, it's funny. It's interesting because so many groups I know, so many investment groups I know, and we've talked about this before, are looking at just this. So all of the top early stage investment groups are thinking about building a network, if they haven't done so already, of individuals that they believe can impact the trajectory at a very early stage and are motivated to do again and to take a big slug of it. And I think that's right. I think that's entirely right. I think, generally speaking, that the build out of such a network needs to take into consideration the distinct TRLs associated with different opportunities. You need to be matching talent with their ability to impact these different TRLs, because each TRL throws up different types of challenges and opportunities. So I think there needs to be that consideration, but you need to think about the profile of these individuals. I think there are some obvious profiles. People who have done it before, you might put in there. But equally, if they've been really successful and they've made money, their motivations will have changed. Okay, their motivations will have changed a lot. So they don't have that big dog barking behind them, forcing them to move on. They've made a lot of money. Most people in that situation, most people will say, "Well, I can go do some of the things I've always wanted to do." Or, what bit of the company journey I really enjoyed? I enjoyed from kind of TRL 8 on. So we have a commercial grade first of a kind. We've got some early traction with customers and partners. And now I want to go and build that because that was the most fun. And that is the most fun. The kind of when you're sitting there scratching your head thinking, how the hell am I going to get a TRL 5? I've got this early pilot that doesn't really work that well. And I've got to convince an industrial partner to co-sponsor my pilot. How am I going to do that? That stinks. That sucks. No one wants to kind of go back to that. So you've got to, so it may not be the person that's just done it before. It may be someone new. You really got to kind of think that through. And then you need to be able to give these individuals deal flow. What we have found is they don't want to just consider one thing. They want to consider lots of things because the way they're going to make their decision probably is by the people attached to it. So that could be some of the early researchers that are attached to the project, maybe some of the early investors that are sitting around the board early on, whatever. It's going to be people that help to make that decision for them. So you need certain people in it already. If you don't have any people in it, I think that becomes a challenge. And then it's more of an intellectual exercise. Well, I know about batteries, therefore I think I can help with this and so on. It's but a lot of it comes to people. It may come to the proximity to their home and how easy it is and, that kind of thing. And, but invariably, I think it comes to the people. So, and it's never like dating. It's never love it. It's very rarely love at first sight. So you have to give them deal flow. And if you can first of all, identify that kind of talent, help to qualify that, segment that, deal with that talent as the customer. That talent is really the customer. You deal with them as the customer.
Good point.
And then present to them various deals over time. They will love you and work with you and want to continue working with you. And then I think you've got a good vehicle then to go and build out companies in a fairly successful fashion. It's really hard to build that. But I think I know a number, this is an area of interest to a lot of investors. And so I think that, and it's critical, I think, to get right. I think that's the biggest blockage. That's the biggest obstacle, I think, in venture building. And so if you get that right, then you can really unlock a lot of efficiency. If you don't have that right, you're going to be hanging around with all the other schmucks who are trying to do searches, at the very early stage. And that's really hard. That becomes really hard.
Yeah. The chemistry of it, I know, without laboring the point, Chris, because I know we're on the same page and aligned here. But, observing how people interact with each other, the chemistry of it, for me, meeting someone and explaining the vision and the ideas that I have, which hopefully is representative of the group and the potential of it, really, that's when rubber hits the road, doesn't it? You can do all the PowerPoints you want. You can do all of that, which is important. But ultimately, I think good people, you meet each other, you see each other in the same light. You go, yeah, I can work with that person. We don't know what's going to happen, but it's going to be a whole heap of fun. And I think that life's about that. And I think an interesting trend that you've previously probably brought to I think you did bring to my attention, the full-time thing, 5 days a week, is becoming a less and less important thing in people's lives. And I think full-time CEOs who I've observed and had relations with, who you think wouldn't have much time, they would like to carve a bit of time out to do something else. And I think it's a really healthy thing for people to have variety and to have that capacity to think about different things, And I think increasingly employees are going to have to recognize that too, which is a lot of the responses of what we have of people who want to be working with us, who would like to work with us, is that this doesn't need to be their main gig if they don't want to. They can interact with us.
I think in a role that, perhaps an exec chair role, for a period of time where they can, let's say, shepherd an opportunity like that and raise the early capital for an opportunity like that and start to put together a little team of researchers or scientists or engineers, whatever is most appropriate. Absolutely. And if they're very high quality, then you're going to get a lot for your money. I think at some point, though, then you absolutely need that commitment of someone who's going to lead it. And maybe at that point, they're bought in and they say, hey, to hell with it, I'm going to commit fully to this. Or they just say, I've still got other commitments, so I will help you. Then you go out and identify the right individual. Exactly. So
find someone else.
But that kind of flexibility, particularly at the early stage, I think can be enormously helpful. If you've got an individual of great quality with the right value set and good skills, I think that can make an enormous difference early on in the life of a business like that. You've done a remarkable thing, Keong. You've started asking me questions, which I don't think anyone has ever done. So now I'm becoming the guest.
Well, Chris, you've actually, it's such a great thing to do for the community, this podcast and putting it together. But yeah, I'm just full of admiration for what you're doing as well, and being so for the ecosystem, and I thank you for that. It's really fantastic.
That's nice.
And I'm looking forward to working with you, Chris.
Thank you so much,
and the team.
And thank you so much for sharing so much of what you guys are doing and how you're doing it. As I said at the top of this show, I just don't know any other early stage investor who is putting up, who is logging the air miles that you guys are logging. And more than that, building the relationships that you guys are building, going to the obvious, going to some really obvious places. But they're so obvious, like no one else is going to those places. So it's like, what the hell? And you guys are doing that and you're breaking through. Yeah. And the lessons that you shared, particularly around you've got to spend the time getting to know these people, building the trust with these people, letting them know you're on their side. If you're truly on their side, if your interests are truly aligned, I think that is a lesson that more in the early stage community need to hear. It is difficult. Being an early stage investor is so hard. It is so hard. But I think what you guys are bringing a very fresh, high energy approach to it, and you're breaking through. And so I commend you for that. All right.
Thanks very much,
Keong,
Chris.
thank you so much. I've loved chatting with you. No doubt we're going to chat again. But until then, thank you so much.
Absolutely.
You've been listening to the Lab to Market Leadership Podcast, brought to you by Deep Tech Leaders. This podcast has been produced by Bauhaus. You can find out more about us on LinkedIn, Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts.